once we get the link going, and then we are good to go. Okay. Right. We are live on both platforms now. We're a little bit early, and I know my Caribbean people will be maybe on time. So what we'll do with this extra 2 minutes that we have is talk about what we're going to speak about today. We're going to speak about some challenges that people might face in the workplace. We've got people already jumping in and saying, live and direct.
Ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go. They don't want to hear me waffling at all. You know what I mean? Jeez, I was just trying to warm it in and everything. Look, I'm here for this because I know a lot of people wanted to discuss these kind of matters as well. And so I'm grateful. So what I'm going to do, seeing as people are already here, if you don't mind, we're going to kick it off.
Let's go.
Let's go. So people, thank you so much for jumping in. Thank you so much for joining in. I go by the name of Cersei. As you all know, this is Rum and Bass. We are speaking to a specialist in the arena of dealing with things like workplace bias. You deal with diversity in the workplace. You deal with your yoga, you're a yogi as well, right?
Indeed.
You deal with equality. You deal with so many things. You go by the name of LaDonia, please, LaDonia Lawrence, because the middle L is silent.
Yes.
Remember, we had that convo. And I'm happy that we managed to get some time. And this is a long time coming. We've been speaking about this since July, something like that.
Yes.
And so I'm glad we've had the time to kind of make this happen, because I think it's an important conversation that we need to have regarding the workplace, regarding how things are in the workplace and some of the challenges that we may face as a people. So without any further ado, I'm introducing you, but I'd like, in case I missed one and two things, I would like for you to tell the people who you are and what you do.
Yes, thank you, Cersei. Good evening to everyone who's logged in. I think you gave a pretty good introduction. I was very impressed with it, and you pretty much covered all the bases in that. My arena is quite wide. I've been doing well-being work for a good number of years, probably coming up to 15 years now, and working specifically with our communities, with global majority, with Black communities for maybe the last 7 years. And really focusing on our well-being and the challenges that we faced, being Black people, being people of color in a Western context. And really, that's what my work is all about. And of course, I teach dance, I teach yoga, and I teach movement. And they all kind of intersect together to work on supporting the well-being of people and also the well-being of organizations, helping organizations to be more ethical, equitable, and equal places, really. So a few things.
Few busy out there. So we started, we met at an event in Bristol.
Yes.
And you were waving your Bayesian flag, and I said, what? Big up the islands, and so on and so forth. And then we got speaking and kind of learned a little bit more about what you did as far as inclusion, etc., is concerned. And so whilst you said that your work is quite vast, we're going to touch on all of these subjects. But first and foremost, tell us a little bit about the kind of inclusion or the bias type training that you do and what you experience, what you see in the workplaces.
Yeah. There's two kind of things that I see in the workplace. The first thing that I have been seeing over the years, particularly since the pandemic, is, Black people and people of color experiencing difficulties in terms of microaggressions, workplace bullying, all of those kind of things, but also after the pandemic and George Floyd, experiencing pain, witnessing injustice, and having to go into work and act like nothing was happening. And that was when I started getting loads more clients coming through and be like, I'm actually in pain. I'm actually dealing with so much, and I can't go and talk to my manager. I have to come in and act as normal. I have to just accept what's going on the planet, seeing my people being experiencing police brutality, fearing for my life, fearing for my son, my daughter, and still having to come to work. And that was when I started to say, okay, we need to do a bit more actually to support our communities and support ourselves, because we were suffering, we were struggling, and there was no support systems that were put in place, which is what led me to doing specific well-being work for our communities.
Okay, so you said that specifically since let's say the pandemic kind of kicked in, you were noticing more and more people were speaking about their experiences. But you've been in this industry for 15 years, there or thereabouts, right? '09 to now. What would you say have been some of the key changes that you've seen over the years? You know, I know it's all culminated in a case of, oh well, yo guys, we really need help. But you know, before that, what was happening? What wasn't happening, and what started happening?
I think in one way it was harder to talk about these things because even words like equity, even words like diversity, they weren't bandied around as much. And also there was that common phrase of like having a chip on your shoulder. So if ever a person, a black person or a person of color would be like, hey, I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that, we would often get told there's a chip on the shoulder, there's a chip on the shoulder. And that the UK isn't racist, you know, these things aren't happening. We're settled, we're beyond that. We're nothing like wherever, South Africa or whatever else. We've got that covered. So I think it was really brushed under the carpet. After the pandemic, everything was brought to light, and organizations on the surface of it are doing more work around diversity and inclusion. So in one way, it's better because there's more conversations. But I think what isn't happening is the real like work around anti-racism and anti-oppression. So it's all well and good like tick boxing and saying, okay, we're doing diversity, we're trying to get more people in roles or positions. But if they're not actually looking at like policy and actually changing things from the root, it's not actually creating the change that we'd want to see. So in some ways better, but in other ways we've still got a long way to go.
Okay, and when you talk about changing things from the root, you know, I myself, obviously, as you know, people, we work in music, right? So it's in the music industry, it's a lot more subtle, I would say, because we're allowed to be on stage, right? So we can be on stage, we can be waving our hands, we can making the people jump up and down, we can be entertaining. But then for a very long time, even in key stations that were targeted to us, so I don't want to name them, but they have X's in the name, right? You see the ta, you see the tra, you know, or whatever. We're not gonna call out certain names, but people leading those stations or platforms, even though that segment of the platform might be targeted to us, weren't people from the community, right? So you ended up either meeting a glass ceiling or a brick wall where it was like, okay, cool, there's these other things relating to the culture that need exposure. And it's not just, you know, it's to build the culture. And there wasn't that understanding. I guess what I'm saying is when you get to the point where you start saying, okay, we need to delve a little bit deeper. What are the key questions and what are the key things that we should be looking for, and what are the key things that, because obviously again we're going to get to the part where it culminates into us getting to 2020 and saying, oh my gosh, it's too much, we can't take it anymore. But you talk about microaggressions, you talk about chip on the shoulder, and there's so many people that when I put the post up, and I don't want to do the majority of the talking, I'm just going to ask the question, right? But when I put the post up, there's so many people that hit me on the quiet and said, you know, in the workplace, especially women of color as well, they've had so many experiences of having to be the strong black woman, of having to provide the solutions for certain things, and they're just tired. They're just tired of the onus being on them to make things work. And I was saying, if you don't do the job though, then the job doesn't get done, and it's like a double-edged sword, right? It doesn't get done, it's your fault. But you have to do the job, even though it may not be your job. Do you see what I'm saying? So how does these type of things get?
Yeah. One thing that I think is very important for us is to, when that intuition kicks in, that it's like something isn't right there, is to believe yourself. We have been gaslit for centuries, telling us that we're imagining things and that things aren't accurate. If you feel like you're doing your work and you're doing a good job and you're not getting platformed, or you're getting overlooked for promotion, or snide comments are being made about you, or you're being ostracized, or you're being left out, trust your intuition and trust your gut instinct. And that, I would say, is actually one of the most important things, because when I work with my clients, I can see people double, triple guessing themselves, saying, oh, but maybe it's another reason, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. The first one is to tune into your intuition and trust yourself. And the second thing I would say is finding a way to advocate for yourself. That's a whole thing in itself. But the second thing I would say as well is, where possible, finding allies. Because something that isn't talked about as much is racism is not something that it just happens to people of color. It's something that white society does to people of color. The structure of racism is actually a white problem. So actually, we need, why I deal so much with anti-racism is because we also need to have the white community working in being allies, working in dismantling systems, and working in being actively anti-racist. So it's not just on us as Black or people of color to do the work. It's a collaborative effort. And I think those are the two things that I really, really try and hammer home when I'm working with people, organizations, when I'm doing talks, anything.
How do I get an ally?
Yeah, it's reaching out to your community and having these conversations and seeing who's willing to go there. Since I've been doing this work over the last 5 years, there's certain friends that I've dropped off because they don't want to go there. They don't want to have these conversations. And it can be really scary, but it's about being honest. I posted on Instagram during the riots, actually, about an incident that I had with a bunch of colleagues where we were all doing coaching for an organization. It was all white group. And in that WhatsApp group, a white guy came and he made a racist comment. And I responded in the group and I said, you know, that's not appropriate. You shouldn't be making that comment. And so many people messaged me behind the scenes in the DM to say, we stand with you. What that man said was wrong. Are you okay? And I said, if you really stood with me, you'd be opening your mouth in the WhatsApp in a public forum in front of everyone. And I chose to leave that WhatsApp group. And one person came and said, I'm ashamed I didn't speak up. I'm going to report that man to the organization and I'm going to work on being an ally. And that's the only person that I have continued to have a relationship with, because when the ish hits the fan, you notice who will stay quiet and who will speak up. And the ones who speak up are the type of people that you want to have around you in your life. Not that you're using them, you'll have their back too if you need to, but we need to have people that are willing to fight the good fight alongside us.
I think that's very important when you speak about this. I remember a story I was once told by somebody I used to work with, actually, a long time ago. But they had family members that were at a football match and some racism had taken place. Right, it was a children football match, whatever. Some racism had taken place, and they kind of and this person's family hollered at them and said, "Oh, what should I do? You know, you working around, you know, Black people. What should I do when something racist happens?" And they'd asked me, and I was like, first thing is, why did they just say to the person that's racist? It's wrong. Like, you identified there was a problem and you just left it. And what you just said there kind of reminded me that there are so many people that see the problem.
Yeah.
But either, I don't understand why they may feel like it's not their place to say anything. And it's like, so go to the Black person. Oh, how do I deal with this? Just tell the person that they're wrong. You know, that's how you deal. Sorry, I'm not the expert. You're the expert. But
this is starting point. Yeah, in these situations, we would feel like common sense would prevail, but it doesn't. And the reason why is because in any of these systems, the patriarchy, white supremacy, there are people that have the privilege. And if you're a white person in privilege, it's very, why would you want to give up privilege? Why would you want to put yourself in a place of discomfort? So often it's easier to stay quiet, to not go into that discomfort. But actually, the only way that we're going to start to break these things down is if people are willing to move into that discomfort. And I always give the example, you know, it's up to us as adults to look out for children. It's up for the straight community to support the queer community. It's up for white people to support people of color, because those who are in the position of privilege have a responsibility to create more equity for those who don't have it. But it's very nerve-wracking for people to step out of that privilege and actually be brave enough to take a stand. And for those who do, you know, that's fantastic. It's a lot of labor for us as Black people to keep on having to fight for our own fight that we didn't create.
Mm. Do you think then that, and this is a question I ask, but you know, you see this all the time, I suppose, in the workplace and so on, and I know but this is good because we're building on this conversation, right? So this is, do you feel then that it's just racism is seen as a Black problem?
Yeah,
you know, and
I 100% do. It's seen as a Black problem or a people of color problem. And I remember someone talking to me, a white person, and they said something about the transatlantic slave trade. And they said, you know, I want to honor your history. And I said, hey, this is your history. This is your history. And that's what is forgotten about. The transatlantic slave happened to us. It was done by the white community, but they don't own that history. They don't own that history.
So we got a comment here, which is what I like. People throw in your comments as well. And there are people that's messaging me on WhatsApp as well. So if you see me look away, it's just because the phone's going up and people have got questions. The global minority people aren't interested in risking their privilege, but we, as people of color, are expected to fix the issue and provide solutions to something that we neither create or perpetuate. Jarring.
100%. That's exactly it. We didn't create this system, so why are we expected to dismantle it? We also can't. We can do our best to advocate for ourselves as individual, but actually we do need the global minority to work on unpicking the system. It's a global collective effort.
Fantastic. And, you know, I like the use of global minority, global majority, because when I came here, and it was like the first times I was hearing terms like minorities. Obviously, when you're in the Caribbean or whatever, there's no such, that don't exist really like that, you know? And the use of it's almost like it's subconscious. The use of the word minority just makes your thing smaller, and it just makes you feel like you're so much smaller. So when we start getting used to using terms like global majority, you feel like there's more of us, you know? So I think it's empowering, those kind of terms. Can you tell me, please, what does microaggressions in the workplace, what do microaggressions in the workplace kind of look like? And the reason why I'm asking these questions is for the younger ones that may be in the workplace now, that maybe it's not like necessarily you or I or people that are, you know, been in the workplace for some time, but younger people may be experiencing this. And I speak to you, and I'm sure you do as well, younger people that are just entering the work world, and they might say, oh, my boss said this, and I don't want to be the one to beat them about the head and say, yo, that's this or it's that. But it would be, you know, if you with your expert knowledge would be able to kind of break down what microaggressions may look like.
Yes, and for me, of course, because I am a Black woman, I have experienced this professionally and personally. And microaggressions, they say that phrase, death by 1,000 cuts. It's like the little and often slights or slurs or snubs that happen to someone who experiences discrimination. And those 1,000 cuts lead to a death of some sort. And for me, microaggressions is such a misleading word, even because they're not micro, they're very, very big. And I remember when I was working from entering the workforce, I experienced multiple microaggressions that I didn't feel confident or able to speak out on. I look back, I remember having one manager who like assigned me to a project with a football team and was like, oh, it will be amazing. Like you'll work with all the kids, you'll get your tracksuit on, and like your BAME is when BAME was a thing, your BAME, their BAME. And I thought, I don't wear tracksuits and I don't play football. But you've made an assumption that this is what I do. You think I'm like, there's nothing wrong with playing football, but that's the assumption that you've made on me based on the fact that I was at the time a young Black woman. And, you know, all of these kind of things that make you think, oh, why are you saying that? That doesn't feel right. But that fear of speaking out, and what does it say to you? It says that you're lesser than because someone's just creating a stereotype about you based on nothing, based on their own preconceived notions.
I used to. So when you speak about sport, I remember the days of watching football on TV.
Mm,
The days of watching football on TV. But I know you said you're not really into football, but in sports, whenever the
mm,
black people used to be playing, it used to be, oh, he's big, he's strong, he's fast,
yeah,
and it used to just be that used to be the only words that were used to describe us, right?
mm,
Um, and even then, trying to explain to people, yo, why is it when this particular player touches the ball, whether it be Wayne Rooney or whatever, he's intelligent, he's got a footballing brain, but the black guy that touches the ball, Sterling, he's just big, strong, and fast. You know what I mean?
mm,
And all of these things kind of tap into biases, maybe
yes,
unconscious biases that exist. We've got a comment here actually. I want to make sure that we get all the comments. Ooh, I gotta say it right. Ooh,
mm,
microaggressions. Professionally, they're throwaway comments that chip away at your spirit about your food, your hair, the way you dress, the colors you wear, and the way you speak. Um,
mm,
absolutely, absolutely, and we all experience it. And I think, as women, you guys probably experience it way more. We all experience it, I'm sure, but way more than necessarily us, because it's so. I feel like maybe I'm talking out of turn here. There's like so many more different things, like comment here, your hair or your whatever. If I remember one time I used to have a little while ago, still used to have my locks and whatever, and used to be comments on that. Um,
mm,
and you're a bit like, well, I'm not an alien,
mm,
so I don't understand what the obsession is, but I don't
mm.
know, it's wild.
It
Um,
is wild. Yeah, I was going to add, it's because we are taught and we have been taught for generations that whiteness is the default. So anything that is other than it gets perceived as alien, firstly. And secondly, I think black women do experience microaggressions in a different way to black men. But I think that the microaggressions and stereotypes that black men experience can almost be veiled as positive things, because on the
yeah,
surface of it sounds positive. Black men are viewed as strong, sexy, almost like quite like rugged, animalistic, all of these things, which can appear to be positive, but actually we're just stereotyping. Black men are multifaceted. Black men are not a monolith. Black men are sensitive. Black men are emotional. Black men are fathers, brothers. They're everything. So all of these things just come from that. They're just perceiving black men as, an object, often a sex object or an aggressive object. And black women are perceived as aggressive and or strong. So I think it's different struggles.
hmm and
Mm,
I would agree with you. A friend of mine said something that was quite profound, and I don't know if she created it herself, not
mm,
this year, but she said, as black people, we're invisible until we're perceived as a threat, and
yeah.
then you see us,
Mm,
um, and that kind of stuck with me because it's so true, so many times I could be in a line waiting for something. I'm sure it's happened to you as well, and people just walk past you like like you're not there, and the minute you say, "Excuse me," oh, and I'm not gonna attack you. I'm just saying you've walked past me in the line, and we've all been standing up and waiting.
mm,
Um, so it definitely is something that um, we need to still consider, and especially if you're young and you're going into the workplace, it's something that you need to monitor. And I think one of the ways that we can address it as well is by setting boundaries
setting
very early.
boundaries. Setting boundaries, because certain people who do these microaggressions, yes, they are ignorant, but also they there's a part of them that knows who they can and can't get away with. And it can be really nerve-wracking to set boundaries when you're young, but it can be nerve-wracking at any time. And even things like, having affirmations, or before your day at work, looking at yourself in the mirror, playing a certain song that hypes you up and telling yourself, nah, I don't need to take whatever. I'm strong, I'm confident, I'm whatever you want to imbue. Having your posture, standing up straight, all of these things really can help you to just stand in your power when confronted with people that feel like they're more than you, because actually they're not. They're a human and you're a human. And something I've noticed in our communities as well, because we have so much respect for elders, and that's part of our community. We look up to our aunties, our uncles, our grandparents. Sometimes that I've seen with my younger clients, that can then transfer to the workplace where they feel like they can't speak up to an older colleague, specifically, particularly if it's a, you know, a white colleague, even more so if it's a white male. But it's like actually divorcing ourselves from that and finding ways to say, I can still respect my elders, but at the same time, in a work context, I'm a professional and I should be respected, and finding a way to kind of separate out the professional and the personal.
That's a fantastic point. So
Mm.
because so many times, and I found that when I first started in the work world, not I I'm laughing because I had so many situations where um I was probably a lot less tactful than I should have been,
Mm,
but I didn't know how to navigate, right?
mm,
So I just knew one way of dealing with things, and it's I'm gonna tell you about yourself, and that's it. And
mm,
that's not necessarily the best way,
mm,
as I learned over the years. But
mm,
certainly standing up for yourself and setting boundaries and making sure that
mm.
we don't let things slide.
Yeah, 100.
Um, because that's difficult as well, right? You let okay, God, it's not that deep, not
Yeah,
right, and then it becomes a big thing later on. Bay says over reverence puts a target on your back, and I would definitely agree with that. Um, the sorry, you're about to say something. I don't
yeah.
want to
So,
any of the nuggets that you're gonna drop here.
no, I was gonna say like two things really. One, yes, I understand what you're saying about, you know, maybe you didn't deal with it in the best way, but truthfully, there's no right or wrong way to deal with racism. It's one of the hardest things that someone has to deal with. It can be soul destroying. It's a trauma. So actually, I never want people to beat themselves up for the trauma response. Like we can learn from it and we can grow from it, but there's no right or wrong way. So if someone flips out one time and is like, "Do you know what, don't even talk to me like that," and switches, I get it. I also, if someone it feels too nervous and scared and just goes in their room and eats a tub of ice cream, I get it. So I never want to beat anyone up because we're all trying to do the same thing, but it's learning from, okay, what went well in my response, what didn't, what would I like to do differently next time.
What does racial trauma look like then?
It can look like so many things. It can look like low self-esteem. It can look like wanting to change our skin or hair features so that we fit in. And that can be so subtle that we don't even notice that we're trying to do it. For example, when I was newly into the workplace, I used to not wear certain jewelry. I wouldn't be caught wearing jewelry like this when I was in my early 20s because I'd be worried about what people think of me. I would always have my hair down. I would never wear my afro. You know, it can look like not feeling able to challenge authority. It can look like, you know, snapping at the people that are closest to you because you're struggling with so much at work. You know, it can be really deep. But the thing that I would always say is that it with any trauma, it can always be supported with healing modalities, and there is possibility to heal. So I don't want this conversation to feel like, oh, we're just struggling with racism and we can never get out of it and we're down. There's always a way to move forward, to grow and to heal. And that's what I want my work to focus on how we can elevate and how we can move forward and how we can look after ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And I mean, that's a lot of your presence online is about movement as well.
mm,
And it's about healing, it's about dealing with some of the traumas. One of the things I wanted us to make sure that we covered though is what does that look like? Because we do have several people, and I know in several conversations, especially my great friend, she because my schooling was slightly different. I wasn't exposed to some of the things that people have been exposed to over here. So yes, when I went to secondary school, I had teachers say you ain't gonna be nothing, etc., etc., etc. But I wasn't indoctrinated in a system that kept on telling me
yeah.
from
Mm,
primary, you're not gonna be nothing, you're not gonna achieve nothing, etc. And so I think what has happened a lot is you have people in their 30s, their 40s, and older that over the years have just been impacted, and then it's been compounded. So you started at school, you were told, you know, in a roundabout way, you're black, you're not going to really achieve as much as everybody else. Your parents are telling you you got to work 10 times harder in order to get the same, you know, level of movement. And then you get to the workplace and you're still being beaten about. How can you shake that off? How can you kind of, I know it's not an overnight process, but what can you do to start to relieve the shackles of all of that kind of stuff?
I guess there's a couple of ways. I mean, there's many ways, but one of the ways that I would think about is, you know, writing down things that are positive about you, keeping a list of positive feedback, thinking about things that you're good at and reciting that to yourself. And even some people use affirmations, looking in the mirror and telling themselves positive things. That's one way. Another way is to find people that resonate with you, either from your background or that look like you, that are doing the things that you want to do. If you look at your organization and senior leadership are all white males and you're a young black female, that's not going to make you feel like you can aspire to more. But if you get on social media, if you get on LinkedIn, if you start asking around and try to find people in your image that are elevated, that are in positions that you want to, and if you can get in a mentor, then you can start to conceive the pathway that you can have. When I started out as a fitness instructor and a yoga instructor, I didn't see any black teachers. And I would start to feel like, is it possible for me to have this career? Is it possible for me to live a life of health? And then I said, actually, let me start looking around. I started following more Caribbean fitness instructors, more African American fitness instructors. And then I saw myself in their image. And that's what gave me a vision of where I can get to. So I think looking for role models is a really, really important one.
Okay. Talk to me about sustainable change.
Sustainable change in organizations is one thing. That's where it comes back to a lot of allyship again, and also advocating for yourself to get into, you know, positions of power. But sustainable change as an individual is finding the things that work for your soul and trying your best to stick with them. If I have to go into a hostile environment, which as an anti-racist trainer I often do, I'm going into rooms full of white people to talk to them about racism and what they're going to do, I will make sure I'm meditating beforehand. I will make sure that I'm of offline for the rest of that evening. I will visualize a white light of protection around myself as I enter that space. I will carry my ancestors with me so that I'm never alone. And I will keep doing these practices so that I'm protected in this environment, and I'm not going to stop. And that's what's going to create that individual sustainability. Obviously, there's going to be days where it's harder and, you know, you might drop off, but coming back to like what soothes me, what works for me, is a really lovely way to just try and create that sustainability in yourself.
I
Mm.
read your website, and I know that you had well, it's out there in public eye, so I'm sure you might be okay to speak about it slightly.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce the long word. It begins with E, but anxiety and some health
Mm.
issues.
Yeah.
How this was in 2017, I think you were diagnosed. How can you talk to us a little bit about that? And because I know there's so many people that I know personally have reached to 30, 35 plus
Mm.
and are just recognizing that they've got ADD or ADHD or
Mm.
are autistic, you know, somewhere on the spectrum, and coming
Mm.
to terms with these types of things and challenges.
Mm.
Um, so whilst it's not exactly the same thing, you know, I want to discuss how you kind of have dealt with finding something out later on. Say later on, you're not like incredibly old, but you know, if you had it from
Mm.
your child, then you would have known, right? This is what I've got. But finding it out later on in your 20s or whatever, how do you
Mm.
come to terms with things like that when you've been living a certain way?
Gosh, it's hard. And I mean, I'm one of those people where it's like everything relates back to colonialism. I had so the disorder is endometriosis, which I was diagnosed with in 2017, but I had been having those symptoms since I was 11 years old. And you know, when you look at the healthcare system, there's a strong proportion of underdiagnosis in these conditions in women, and even more so in Black women. And that all correlates with the strong Black woman phenomenon. And the reason why is because, you know, back in the day, as part of the transatlantic slave trade, they were telling us that Black bodies are stronger. So as a result, when Black women would go to the doctor and say, I'm in pain, I need help, I need support, we're often not listened to and we're often overlooked. So when I finally was able to get support and healing, I really had to reach out to my community, reach out to my peers, and get a lot of help outside of the traditional medicine system. Yes, I still do engage with the NHS, of course, but also finding, spiritual practitioners, doing my own spiritual healing and finding other community-based practices that support me because, as African people, our healing would have always been in community. It's a very Western thing to heal in, or recent Western thing to heal in isolation because, pre-colonialization, they would have different communities would have healed in community as well. So I think finding ways to do that was really important for me.
That's very interesting. I think what you just said there about healing within community, and a lot of things that you've said so far, community means a lot. Ancestors, just understanding history. It's not just doing it by yourself, for yourself. You're doing it with the aid of everybody else. And I think that's one of the things that's really resonating in this particular conversation with you. And if there's somebody that's not necessarily accustomed to thinking like that, because the Western way isn't that way, right? How would you suggest that they could potentially start, or start finding their path in that, or start identifying these things within themselves?
If people feel comfortable, maybe trying something as simple as a class or a club that they were interested in. If approaching a space of healing feels too intense, which it can, sometimes it can be simple as finding a book club or going to an event. Look, I met you through one of your events. That's a part of building community. That was a night out. That was a Juve event. That was it was healing for me, because carnival is healing for me. But on the surface of it, it's not a healing activity, but actually building community. We spoke, we got to know each other, and it goes on from there. So finding ways to connect with like-minded people, I think, on a basic level can be a good way to start.
Definitely a great starting point. We've spoken about systems, we've spoken about its limitations and bias. How much more difficult would that be for somebody with a disability, maybe, or some neuro challenges, etc.? How much? Yeah.
Sadly, it will be harder because when you're a person of color, your health outcomes statistically in the UK are poorer in terms of mental health, physical health. This gets compounded if there's another layer of discrimination or another intersection. So someone with a disability, someone with neurodivergence, someone who's queer, there's going to be higher risk of systemic challenges, which is really, really difficult. But that's why when we look at people as a whole, we look at all of their intersecting parts. So we can't just be like, oh, you're Black, so your only challenge is racism. No, that person might be experiencing sexism. They might be experiencing ableism. And then when we look at them as a whole person, we can really support them holistically as an individual. And I think that's really important.
Brilliant. So talk to me about your book, Back Yourself. Now, the book's coming out next year, right?
Yes.
You're dealing with a lot of these things that we've already spoken about, a lot of the challenges. But I want you to elaborate. Tell people about the book. Tell them, the research that's gone into it. I know it's a load of years of research going into it. Talk the things, man.
Yeah, so my book, Back Yourself, A Wellbeing Guide to Healing from Racial Trauma, is out in April next year, but it's out for pre-order already. So if you get your copy early, you'll get some free healing meditation downloads from me to your inbox. And it's really a culmination of my years of working with Black people and people of color and my own experience and hearing all of the topics and issues that we're talking about. So each chapter talks about a different issue, from colorism to transgenerational trauma to microaggressions in the workplace to othering. We talk about why it happens, and I give active tools and tips and healing methodologies for people to come out the other side. So my hope is that it's almost a workbook so that people can read through it, take the bits that resonate, and by the end have their own framework for them to live a happier, healthier life under the system that we're living in. I truly believe that we can thrive, but we do have to just put a little bit more work in it. But I believe the fruits of the labor will yield amazing results for our community. So I'm just like, I'm so passionate about this work.
And we're passionate about the work that you're doing as well, because I think it's incredibly important. It's about subjects that a lot of people are, I know from the messages that I've got received, sorry, a lot of people are interested in, but a lot of people don't really understand the first steps, or they don't really necessarily know the first steps to take in order to either seek assistance, guidance, help, or even find those people that are like-minded, right? So you're doing very, very important work here. So we are appreciative of you. What you didn't do, LaDonya, is tell the people where they can pre-order.
Yes, so you can pre-order it on my website, which you can find that on my Instagram, but it's www.movewithladonya.com. You can order it there, order it in advance. You'll get an email from me once you do. And I really believe that it will have everything you need to be a perfect little container as part of or a start of your healing journey. Everything in it is I've tried it myself. I've worked with clients, hundreds of clients. So I know that this method and this methodology works.
Brilliant. So tell me about movement, and tell me about, because obviously if I follow you, well, I do not, if I follow your IG, I know there's a lot of movement, and you do speak about, you know, sometimes using your movement just to heal, to maybe get rid of negativity around you, etc. But for the people that are not following, which they should be, and I implore that they do immediately follow, talk to us about movement. Talk to us about how you got into it and what it means to you, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Movement saved me. Movement was the thing that in my early 20s, or my late teens and my early 20s, when I had anxiety, it was actually movement that took me out of it. Dance, yoga. I move every single day of my life, not always intense movement, sometimes gentle, sometimes stretching, you know, but every single day of my life, I move. And for our communities, for global majority communities, movement is a big thing. You go to Africa, you know, traditional tribal community, we have drum, we have dance, for weddings, for funerals, for every celebration. You go to Asia, you go to the Middle East, you go, you know, movement and music is a massive part of it. And when we don't move, all of that tension, the cortisol, the fight or flight, it stays in our body. We're now on our laptops all day, every day. We're stuck in that position, and we feel terrible. You know, when your granny used to say, "Go for a walk, get fresh air," she was onto something. She was onto something, because that moving for us is so healing. And it doesn't need to be, I mean, I know you're very active, doing some intense exercise, which is amazing, but it doesn't always have to be that. It can be accessible movement. It can be Tai Chi, it can be Qigong, it can be putting on your favorite music and just dancing. It can be anything that just gets us shaking it out. And that's so powerful for us, for our mental health, for our communities. We need that. We need that.
What's your favorite movements?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know if I have a favorite, but yoga is the thing that really speaks to me, because it syncs mind and body. And then dance, especially when I'm on the road at Carnival, nothing beats it. So I think those two things.
Not gonna lie, when we were at the event, you definitely were waving your flag, and you definitely were moving.
I was there, I was moving. If you see me in yoga class, I'm very calm. You see me on the road, it's a different woman. Same woman, two parts actually, two parts.
Which is completely understandable. You also have a podcast. Tell me about the podcast, man.
Yes.
We're here to talk the things and celebrate you as well, you know.
Thank you so much, Sarah C. Well, I've got my podcast. It's called Intersections. I run it with my friend and co-host Harpreet. and it's all about people with different lived experience. Also, Harpreet's from a Punjabi Sikh background. I'm, of course, from a mixed heritage Black background. And you just don't get to hear those conversations. We're quite separate communities in many ways, but we have so many similarities. So I love running the podcast with Harpreet. We have such amazing guests come on there from all different things. We talk about relationships, religion, disability, sexuality, and we just chop it up with such a wide range of people to just hear different stories and different experiences. And I truly believe that from hearing each other's different experiences, we can work to be more empathic, more understanding, and more equitable, which is ultimately what I'm all about.
Building towards that.
Yeah,
Recently, we had a little situation going on with, I don't know if you know about the Heinz baked beans,
I definitely do.
Heinz tomato ketchup scenario. And for
Mm.
those that don't know, you had a picture where it said based on a true story, and you had a bride who was Black, a groom who was white, you had one Black woman who I presume is the bride's mom,
Mm-hmm.
and what seemed to be the groom's family. So everybody else, it was a white man, a white woman, and the groom, obviously. So the implication, I believe, was that the bride's dad was non-existent. Now there has been uproar about this, and I believe a few people have directly contacted Heinz, whether it be online, etc., etc., etc. Just letting the people know that those that don't, majority of you guys already know, but just for those that don't, and for those people that are tuning in from the States and in Jamaica that I know. And the implication is, or it's implied that, you know, the bride's dad isn't about. Heinz have issued a statement, and we've seen this all too many times, right, Danya? Where it's, oh, we're sorry, it was unintentional, we didn't know, oops, kind of thing, and kind of get on with your day. Now, I'm so glad that well, I'm not glad that it's happened, but I'm glad that we're talking so soon after the event. That because there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about in regards to this. Number one, in your expert field, in your area of your speciality, how would you approach Heinz and kind of talk to them, apart from, you know, in the back of the head top and saying, hey?
The main thing that shocked me about that, well, it didn't shock me, but the main factor is that it got signed off. And
Right.
for something to get signed off at a big company like Heinz, they would have had to go through many levels of like, yep, this is fine. Next department, yep, this is fine. Yep, casting, yep, this is fine. Right, we're putting it out. And the fact that it got to that level shows me, either there's, well, probably two things. There's either very limited diversity within the organization in terms of who's able to sign this off, and B, they are not an actively anti-racist organization, because even if there is diversity, if it's not anti-racist, that doesn't matter, because not that phrase, not all skin folk are kinfolk. And even if people are trying their best, if you haven't had anti-racism education, you're not necessarily going to notice that things are wrong or be able to call it out. I know I'm learning more and more about this topic despite having worked in it for many years. So it would be actively looking at what are the underpinnings of the core values of this organization that this was allowed to happen, because it's absolutely disgusting. And what about the Black employees that are now having to deal with this, as they're having to go to work and again pretend to be normal? Because there's going to be some Black employees, I'm sure, at Heinz.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what got me though slightly is, within all the uproar and outrage, is, people are saying, oh, well, they must have had some Black people that work in the marketing department, etc. And I was wondering, is it a case of, this code switching at work, where we've both spoken about being in a scenario, you probably, I don't know, but that person's probably looked at it and said, why, that don't look too good, But sure, I don't want to rock the boat. I could just roll with it, And now, let's say the weekend's happened, everybody's been outraged, everybody's tagging Heinz. Monday morning comes in and they go, LaDonya, why didn't you say anything about this? Come on, you must have known. And then that person's, so you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're that black person that's let that go, or
Exactly.
is that not the same in 2024? Is it?
I think it's really hard. I think there's two things. I think if you're in that organization and you notice, how hard is that to speak out, specifically if you're the one or there's not many of you? How hard is it to then think, right, I'm going to speak out now, and then this team are going to be annoyed at me, and there's going to be tension, and will it impact my day to day, or will it impact my chance of promotion? That's a whole mind shift. And the second thing, there's this phrase that I like that it's like, if you put a frog into boiling water, they'll jump out. But if you put a frog in water and you boil it slowly, they'll boil to death. So sometimes if you're in that environment and you're boiling to death, you don't even know it until you're dead. So it can be so hard to see what's going around you when you're so inveigled in an institution. So again, actually, it's the responsibility of the global minority in that space to not perpetuate harm, not for the black people to not be harmed.
So it's for them to look at it and say, hold on a minute, what's the message you're trying to put? And to date, at this point, I don't think anybody as annoyed as we are with this situation, I don't feel anybody knows the picture that they're trying to. I don't know what they're trying to say. I don't know if you do, but I don't get it. Like, I'm looking at the picture. She can't eat noodles. Sorry.
I mean,
what are you saying?
It was very weird. It was very weird, and the black woman eating the spaghetti. It was very, very bizarre. And that is exactly where we see the unconscious bias creep in. That person or the people who made that probably didn't consciously think, oh, you know what? Black people don't often have fathers, so I'm not going to put a father there. They just said, right, we'll cast a mother and a father, and we'll cast a mother for the black woman. They just said it like that because it's so deeply embedded. And that's what people really need to be aware of. These biases are very deep. They can have a massive impact.
You see, these are parts of conversations that I have. I speak to my friends especially from the US, and I say things like, you know, I almost don't. Well, I don't think sometimes with racism that it's conscious. It's not exactly what you said. It's not they're thinking, oh, we're gonna get the black person, we're gonna do this. It's just subconscious. It's just there because it's part of the framework, it's part of the system, it's part of what you've seen forever since you've been born. So you don't really notice it. So you're doing the great work of trying to unpick all of that. I don't envy you whatsoever. When you step into these environments, and I'm assuming that people are saying, we're not racist, we're all right. And you're having to go, you know, I'm sure you got exercises, whatever that you do that you might make them go, oh, you know what, actually, and you got these, you know, I ain't got a racist bone in my body, my best mate's black, and all of that you gotta deal with, right? The other thing, just quickly, I just want to speak about some topical stuff with you because I've got you here, and you know it's great. Shits and gigs, a few weeks back, had a situation. Right. What should they have done? So my issue. Sorry, before we go there, my issue is that I don't watch their podcast really, and maybe I should watch it to be able to comment here. But from everything I know about them, they don't really stand on anything. It's just giggle and laugh, right? So when faced with that situation, I don't know why we would necessarily expect them to stand on anything. But what should they have done in order to deal? How could they have dealt with Andrew Schulz? Because I got so much to ask you on this. But since that, and he's tried to take what racism is.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't have necessarily expected them to do anything different, but I would have hoped for it.
Okay.
I hope that they would have been able to say, you know, that's not acceptable. Because, you know, when you look at, for example, there's a lot of research on dating apps, and black women are consistently rated as the lowest attractive and the lowest number of swipes across all races. So all races consistently rate black women as the least desirable in terms of a mate. So black women are consistently the butt of these kind of jokes, unfortunately, even within our own community. Obviously not from all black men, but from some. And so in that instance, I think why people were so hurt is because we just saw a live example right there of a white man belittling black women and black men not backing it or not sticking up or not standing out for that. And it's just a consistent messaging to black women of like, you're not enough, you know? And I would have hoped that they would have found their way to speak up. But they say they were frozen, they were nervous. I mean, I'll never know, but it was very disappointing.
For me, I don't necessarily buy they were frozen. We're not. They were frozen or they were nervous or fight or flight. I think they said, because you're gonna do what you always do in those scenarios. I mean, you deal with the psychology of this more than I, but I just feel like if you're the kind of, you would have faced that kind of thing before. You would have heard that. You know, it may not have been those words, but you'd have heard that kind of joke before. And if you've never stood up, then at this point in time, you're probably not gonna. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. I think it was very interesting to see what they did after they were called out, for me anyway. And you know, the apology and then the removal of the apology and the this and the that. And I do look at this and I look at what happened with them. I look at the Heinz situation. I look at, you know, not too long ago it was Marks and Spencer's that had the, you know, the monkey on the t-shirt and put the black kid, and then Gucci had the gollywog type scenario. And I think at what point, because this, you know, this permeates through through everything, right? At what point do we make enough moves, or at what point, or what moves can we make to actually stop this? Or it's going to be another generation and it's just the same circle ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And, you know, again, like I said, you're doing fantastic work going out there and pointing out within corporations that, you know, this is the problem. And almost single-handedly, I know you and other people like you trying to dismantle the systems that are in place. I'm sure it's tiring. I'm sure you're exhausted. But one of the things I want to say to you is please continue doing that work. Please continue helping us to break down the barriers and letting us know what we can do from our side as well to assist and help. So thank you once again. Got to make sure you get your flowers here.
Thank you.
For the work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I need you once again, please, for me and for everybody out there, to plug the book, to tell them where they can find you, talk about movement, talk about everything that you're getting up to so that people can come up and.
Yeah, so my website, www.movewithladonya.com. You can find everything there, from the book to the podcast to how to contact me. The book is available for pre-order now, Amazon, Waterstones, Blackwell's. And as I said earlier, if you pre-order the book, you'll get access to some healing meditations into your inbox on the day of launch. So there's an incentive for you now to get the book in advance and make sure you've got that and you're ready to go. So I'm more than well open for anyone to, you know, reach out. I love to have these conversations. And as I said to Sarah C before we got on this call, my Instagram and my inbox lock off automatically. There's no way for me to unlock it between 5:30 in the evening and 9 a.m. the next morning. So don't worry about bothering me. I respond when I respond the next day, and I welcome everything in office hours because I got to practice what I preach.
Fantastic. And once again, you know, thank you so much for being, and I think I've got some questions coming through. They are popping up, but thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us today. We fully and truly appreciate it. Roman Base will be in Bristol very, very soon. So make sure you roll with your friend them and your friend them's friend them, because it's gonna be party time and enjoyment time. But yeah, you know, I just think that these kind of conversations are important. We're all experiencing not only microaggressions, we are all experiencing these challenges in one way, shape, or another, as subtle or as blatant or as explicit as it may be. So knowing that we have somebody that we can speak to, in regards to, even if it's starting the journey of the healing that we speak about, because healing is not just physical healing, sometimes it's mental healing that is necessary, and knowing that there are different alternatives of how to deal with that is absolutely key. So thank you so much, LaDonya, for your time, and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Sherasi. It's been a pleasure, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in.
Fantastic. I'm going to end that there. Give me 1 second. And the stream is